A burning sensation still lingered in my throat, as if the poison had just been forced down, and the excruciating pain tearing through my organs jolted me awake. What met my eyes was not the cold, dim prison of the Chu family, but the boudoir where I had lived for over a decade before my marriage. Sunlight streamed in through the window, and on the small rosewood begonia table lay the mandarin duck embroidery I had half finished. I gasped for air, my undergarments soaked through with cold sweat. Until I heard a sharp, wailing commotion from the outer courtyard. Only then did I truly confirm I, Nai Ching, had crawled back from the sunless yellow springs and been reborn. I won't marry him. That Huazhanting was shot through the spine by a stray arrow. His legs have long been useless. Even the Imperial Hospital says he'll be bedridden for life, and on top of that, he's vicious-tempered. I heard he beat a servant to death just days ago. Father, are you trying to drive me to my death? It was the voice of my half-sister, Nai Zalan. I sat quietly on the bed, a bone-chilling coldness seeping into my eyes. In my past life at this very moment, I had been wholeheartedly preparing for my own marriage, turning a deaf ear to the turmoil in the outer courtyard. Back then, Nai Zalan had also been betrothed to the northern pacifying general, Huazhanting. She refused to marry a cripple, but she couldn't scheme her way out of it without turning her sights on me, forcing me to take her place. Later, to escape the marriage, she secretly engaged in an illicit affair with a good-for-nothing playboy in the capital, even nearly eloping with a bundle of valuables. When the affair was exposed, the northern pacifying general's mansion flew into a rage and directly called off the engagement. My father, feeling that the Nai family had lost all face, hastily married her off to that playboy. She spent the rest of her life in poverty and quarrels. As for me, in my past life, I married the newly crowned Tanhua, Chu Mingxian, as promised, believing I had found a worthy husband, unaware that it was a man-eating den of demons. Chu Mingxian appeared gentle and refined on the surface, but behind the scenes, he was a hypocritical, heartless, selfish, and vicious fraud. He and his pitiful-looking cousin, Bai Yueying, had long been carrying on in secret. They coveted the generous dowry left by my late mother while using my inherited medical skills to pave the way for Chu Mingxuan's rise to power. Once Bai Yueying showed her true colors, they joined forces to imprison me, drained every last drop of my blood, and sent me to my bitter end with a bowl of poison laced with heartbreak grass. Sister, I'm about to marry the Tanhua. Brother Chu is as gentle as jade. Why does he deserve such a good match? While I have to go to the general's mansion to live like a widow? No, you have to help me. Nai Zalan's sobbing pulled me back to my senses. I took a deep breath, suppressing the surging hatred in my eyes, threw on a coat, and pushed open the door. I walked all the way to the main hall. My father, Nai Boyuan, was sitting grim-faced in the armchair, while my stepmother, Ju, was dabbing at her tears with a handkerchief, holding Nai Zalan protectively in her arms. Master, Zalan is your legitimate daughter, cherished and pampered since childhood. That General Hua is now nothing but a cripple. If Zalan marries him, wouldn't her life be ruined? On the other hand, Chu Mingxian has a limitless future. Ju's voice dripped with calculation, and her gaze happened to catch me stepping over the threshold, cutting her words short. Father looked up at me, a flicker of complexity passing through his furrowed brows, yet he didn't rebuke my stepmother's impertinence. I knew perfectly well what was going on, though I was the eldest daughter left by his first wife. In the eyes of my father, the chief imperial physician, I was merely a pawn for political marriage with no backing. He was a man of sycophantic tendencies. Compared to the now disempowered and crippled general of the northern garrison, he favored the rising career of the newly appointed Tanhua, Chu Mingxian. If his most beloved legitimate daughter could marry into the Chu family, it would naturally be a greater boon for him. Father, mother, I bent my knees slightly, performed a bow, and spoke in a calm tone. Nai Zalan, upon seeing me, clung to me as if I were a lifeline. She broke free from Ju's grasp and rushed over, gripping my sleeve tightly. Sister, you love me, so please marry into the general's mansion in my place, won't you? You've always been steady and composed. You can surely endure General Hua's temper. I can't do it. I'll die. Her eyes were filled with urgency and selfishness. With not a trace of guilt toward me, Ju spoke hypocritically. Chinga, your younger sister has been delicate since childhood. She truly cannot bear the bitter cold of the north or the majesty of the general's mansion. You are the eldest sister, always understanding of the bigger picture. Do you mean, mother, that I should swap marriages with my sister? I interrupted her words, my gaze clear and sharp as I looked at my father. The marriage between the Chu and Nai families was arranged by grandfather back then, and the marriage to the general's mansion was also officially settled. If we change it now on a whim, and the two families take offense, how will the Nai family bear the consequences? Upon hearing this, father's face darkened even further. He slammed the table heavily. That's not your concern. We'll just say your birth charts were swapped. What's there to doubt? I'll handle the Chu family myself. But the general's mansion must have someone sent. His meaning was crystal clear. Though the general's mansion had fallen from grace, its lingering influence remained. The Nai family dared not directly break off the engagement and call off the marriage. They had to send a daughter to appease their anger. Since Nai Zilan refused to go, I would have to be the one to take the fall. Watching the three of them, each harboring their own ulterior motives, I found it utterly ridiculous. Since Nai Zilan was so eager to jump into the fire pit that was Chu Mingxian, I would naturally oblige her. But having lived a second life, I would never allow myself to be manipulated again. I lowered my eyes, putting on a look of reluctance and sorrow, and bit my lip as I spoke. Since father has spoken, I dare not disobey. But General Hua is renowned for his might, and now that he has suffered such a calamity, his temper is unpredictable. I fear this journey will be a near certain death. Seeing me relent, Ju was overjoyed and quickly seized the opportunity. Good child, it's admirable that you're considering the bigger picture. Your mother will add more jewelry to your dowry. Jewelry won't be necessary. I lifted my head and met father's gaze directly, my tone carrying an unyielding resolve. Since I am to take my sister's place in this den of tigers and dragons, allowing her to enjoy a blissful marriage, I have only two requests. First, all the household furnishings, shops, and land left by my late mother must be brought with me to the general's mansion without a single item missing. Jusha's face changed instantly. Her mother had been a merchant's daughter, and the dowry of 10 miles of red dowry was an enormous fortune. All these years, Jusha had kept it under her control, planning to cheat most of it away for Nai Zilan through this marriage swap. Your appetite is far too greedy. Jusha couldn't help but speak out. If mother is unwilling to part with it, then let sister go to the general's mansion to suffer on her own. I made as if to turn around. Father sternly scolded Jusha to silence her. After weighing the pros and cons, he looked coldly at me and said, your mother's belongings were always meant to be taken by you. What is the second condition? The second condition, I want the golden box divine needles from the Imperial Hospital's storeroom, the family heirloom *, the golden box rare manuscript *, and the 500-year-old snow ginseng from the storeroom. Father's brow furrowed even deeper. Though I was a daughter and had studied medical texts since childhood, he had never once acknowledged my medical skills. These items, though valuable, were nothing compared to the reputation of the Nai family and the wrath of the general's mansion. Fine, I agree. Father made the final decision. Since it's settled, you two will stay in your respective courtyards preparing for marriage. No more trouble from either of you. I bowed slightly and turned to leave the main hall. The moment I stepped out of the courtyard, a spring breeze brushed past me, and I felt an indescribable lightness throughout my body. The bridal sedan blocked my view, and the dragon and phoenix wedding candles occasionally let out a soft crackle. Without the clamor of music and celebration, this bridal chamber was eerily silent. My accompanying maid pressed close to me, her voice trembling. Miss, I heard that the general has dismissed several physicians these past few days and even replaced all the servants in the courtyard. I interrupted her softly. Just then, heavy footsteps sounded from outside the door, accompanied by the dull thud of wooden wheels grinding over the threshold. The door was roughly pushed open, and a gust of cold wind, carrying the chill of the northern lands and a thick, bitter medicinal smell, rushed in. Get out, all of you. Without my military order, no one is to set foot in the main courtyard. A hoarse, low voice, yet sharp and cold, rang out, "Yes, General." The guards respectfully withdrew and closed the heavy carved wooden door behind them. The sound of the wheelchair stopped in front of me. Without any joyful greeting, a large hand with distinct knuckles and thick calluses directly tore off my bridal veil. I lifted my eyes, meeting Huajianting's gaze without any flinching. Rumors said he was hideous, but the man before me, even seated in a wheelchair, still had a broad and upright figure. However, his complexion showed an extremely unnatural pallor, and his eyes were bloodshot, like a lone wolf trapped in a cage on the verge of losing control. "Why you?" Huajianting's brows furrowed sharply, his gaze cutting across my face like a blade. When the two families were betrothed, they exchanged birth charts and portraits. He had clearly recognized that I was not the originally designated Naizilan. Nai Boyuan had indeed calculated well. Unwilling to part with his favored youngest daughter, he fobbed off his neglected eldest to placate me. Did he truly think I, Huajianting, could no longer wield a blade? He let out a cold laugh, his tone dripping with savage mockery. I sat quietly upright, undaunted by his murderous aura, and spoke frankly. "My younger sister has never been able to endure hardship since childhood, so I volunteered to take her place in marriage. If the General finds me unworthy, you may divorce me and send me back tomorrow. But tonight, having crossed this threshold, I am your wife." He chewed on the word wife, a flicker of wild derision flashing in his eyes. "You." Before the word fully left his lips, he let out a sudden muffled groan, his towering frame instantly doubling over. His hands clenched the armrests of the wheelchair, his nails nearly digging into the wood. "General!" The guard Zhong Feng cried out in shock. Huajianting's forehead veins bulged, the blood vessels on his neck standing out like gnarled tree roots, and his originally ashen face flushed a deep purple, his eyes bloodshot. He jerked his head up to look at me, all reason gone, leaving only the wild frenzy and murderous intent of a beast. He lunged suddenly, though his legs were immobile. The explosive power of his upper body was still astonishing. He seized my neck and slammed me hard against the carved railing of the canopy bed. "Die, all of you, die!" A pained roar tore from his throat, his grip clamping down like iron pincers, nearly snapping my neck in an instant. A suffocating wave washed over me, while the maidservant crumpled to the ground, sobbing and clawing at his hands, only to be flung away by a reflexive sweep of his arm. I did not struggle, for the more I fought, the quicker I would die. On the brink of death from lack of oxygen, I forced myself to remain calm. My right hand swiftly slipped into the wide sleeve of my bridal gown, pulling out the roll of golden casket needles I had prepared long ago. My fingertips pinched a 3-inch filiform needle, and without hesitation, I drove it deep into the Tsuchi point on his arm. Huajianting's arm went numb, his grip loosening slightly. Seizing the opportunity, I turned my head to gasp for air, while my left hand countered by grasping his warm yet stiff wrist, my fingertips pressing on the kun, guan, and kai positions. His pulse was wildly chaotic, like boiling water churning and surging unchecked. This was no mere reversal of qi and blood, it was clearly a violent disorder caused by cold poisons settling into his organs, then forcibly activated by a ruthless medicinal stimulant, snapping his meridians. If not treated immediately, he would not survive the night. Bang! The door burst open with a force, and his personal bodyguard, Zhong Feng, charged in with his sword drawn. His eyes burned with fury at the sight. "Poisonous woman, what have you done to the General?" "Shut up," I cut him off sharply, the crisp voice exploding in the wedding chamber. "If you want him to die from qi deviation, go ahead and draw your sword to kill me." Zhong Feng was stunned by the aura I exuded and haltingly stopped in his tracks. Without a moment's hesitation, I pulled out the second-long needle with my free hand and precisely thrust it into Huajianting's Baihui acupoint atop his head, followed by Shenting and Feng Kai. "Forgive me for the offense," I murmured softly. My hands moved swiftly, tearing open the tight collar of his robe to reveal a muscular chest covered in old scars. On the Danzhong and Duke acupoints, I inserted 2 more needles. The complete set of Wind Path True method flowed like a practiced dance, fast enough that even Zhong Feng had no time to react. As the last needle fell into place, Huazhanting's violently trembling body suddenly stiffened, a muffled groan escaping his throat before he collapsed backward in exhaustion. Quick as a flash, I caught his back and gently eased him to recline against the wheelchair. The madness gradually faded from his bloodshot eyes, reason slowly returning. Huazhanting panted heavily, cold sweat soaking his robe. He lowered his head to look at the delicate golden needles trembling in his body, then raised his eyes to gaze at me, wariness in his gaze, but also a deeper, more probing scrutiny. You know medicine. His voice was hoarse, yet no longer wild. Zhang Feng had also come to his senses by then. The general's breathing was steadier than in any previous episode. He stared at me in shock, his sword slowly sliding back into its sheath. I straightened up, smoothed the crumpled wedding garments, and unhurriedly took out a handkerchief to wipe my fingertips. As the daughter of the Imperial Hospital director, if I didn't even have this much skill to save my own life, how would I dare to marry into the general's mansion as a substitute? Huazhanting said nothing, only stared at me intently, as if trying to see through the calculations hidden beneath my composed exterior. General, there's no need to look at me like that. The Nai family may treat me as a discarded pawn, but I don't see myself as a dead woman. I met his gaze, my tone calm and resolute. The chronic ailment in your legs and the recent frenzy are not battle wounds, they are the result of an extremely insidious and sinister poison. The physicians of the Imperial Hospital might not recognize it, or perhaps they do but dare not speak of it. But I can. I stepped forward, leaning down to meet his eyes. Since I have married into this household, I will protect your life. General, if you trust me, I can not only keep you alive but also make your legs stand again. The red candlelight flickered, reflected in the depths of Huazhanting's eyes. He gazed at me for a long moment, then a faint, cold arc curled at the corner of his lips, half probing, half warning. Nai Qing, you'd better know what you're saying. If you fail to cure me, I will make you personally experience what it truly means to face death 9 times over. I gave a slight smile and deftly withdrew the golden needles from his body one by one. The general can wait and see. The next morning, morning light streamed through the window screen, spilling onto the blue brick floor. I sat upright at the rosewood table, pressing a paperweight onto a sheet of rice paper. Focusing as I lifted my brush, faint rustling sounds came from within the room, and before long, Zhang Feng pushed a wheelchair out from behind the folding screen. Huazhanting had changed into a dark long robe, though his face still bore a hint of sickly pallor. The chilling frenzy in his eyes had faded, replaced by the deep composure and sharpness of one long accustomed to a position of power. He stopped not far from me, his gaze falling on the brush in my hand. His voice was low. You said last night you could heal my leg. On what basis? Just those few needles. I set down the lake brush, laying the written prescription to one side, and rose to walk before him. If the general does not believe me, you are welcome to let me take your pulse again more carefully. Huazhanting remained non-committal, merely staring at me coldly. Taking his silence as consent, I crouched down and directly lifted the robe covering his right leg. Zhang Feng was startled and instinctively moved to stop me. Madam, you must not, it's fine. Huazhanting raised a hand to halt Zhang Feng, his gaze dark and unreadable as he fixed his eyes on me. Ignoring their reactions, I pressed my fingertips into several major acupoints on his leg. The skin felt icy cold, like a lifeless block of ice. Fortunately, due to his years of martial training, his foundation was excellent, and his muscles had not completely atrophied. I traced upward along the meridians until I reached the area between his lumbar and coccyx, where I clearly detected a mass of extreme cold and stagnant energy. Then I took his pulse. After a long moment, I withdrew my hand, stood up, and looked him straight in the eye. General, the arrow wound you sustained at the border was merely a superficial injury. What truly crippled your legs was the stone-cold poison on the arrowhead. This toxin is colorless and odorless, highly adept at lying dormant. As the poison traveled with your blood and qi, it accumulated in the meridians of your legs, blocking the flow of vitality and causing the paralysis of your lower body. If you forcefully circulate your energy or give in to anger, the cold poison will surge back into your heart and meridians, triggering the manic episodes you experienced last night. At these words, a sharp glint flashed in Huajianting's eyes, and his spine instantly stiffened. Jean Feng gasped sharply, blurting out involuntarily. The old imperial physicians at the Thai hospital examined him for half a year and only said the general's lumbar injury had caused qi and blood stagnation. How could you know this so clearly? Huajianting's piercing gaze seemed intent on drilling through me. Nai Boyuan is the deputy director of the Thai hospital, yet his medical skills are merely average among them. A well-bred young lady like you, trapped in the inner chambers, where exactly did you acquire this ability to detect poison by examining the bones? Can a young lady from the inner chambers not understand medicine? I met his scrutinizing gaze, my tone calm and open. My medical skills are not inherited from the Nai family but from my late mother, though my maternal family were merchants. My maternal grandfather was once an itinerant healer. By chance, he obtained a fragmented copy of the Jinkue Jiu Ben *. My mother was exceptionally bright as a child. She thoroughly studied that rare text and later passed it on to me. I paused, a bitter, self-mocking sneer curling at the corners of my mouth. As for why no one knows, generals should understand that the infighting within a household is no less brutal than on a battlefield, with a stepmother in charge. If I, the leftover daughter from a previous marriage, were to excel too much or even outshine my father, the deputy director of the Thai hospital, I would not have lived to see my wedding day. I would have already been lost at the bottom of a dry well. Concealing my talents is my survival instinct. These words were half-truth, half-fiction, perfectly aligning with the survival rules of a grand mansion. Huajianting was a shrewd man and naturally understood such a life of walking on the edge of a blade. The suspicion in his eyes eased slightly, and the wariness around him softened. What a fine example of concealing one's true skill, Miss Nai of the Nai family. Huajianting gave me a deep look. Now that you've diagnosed the root cause, how do you intend to resolve this poison? The stone Jiu cold is a long-standing and rare poison, clinging to the body like an unshakable curse. To uproot it, nothing less than fierce medicine will do. I turned, picked up the prescription on the table, and handed it to Jeanfeng. First, follow this prescription to prepare the medicinal herbs and decoct them into a soup. Starting today, once every 3 days, I will administer a medicinal bath combined with acupuncture to forcefully reopen the blocked meridians. This process is akin to having one's sinews torn and bones pulled. Extremely painful. Are you, General, prepared to endure it? Huajianting crawled out of a pile of corpses. Pain is the last thing I fear. His voice was icy and resolute, each word striking like a hammer. Just as Jeanfeng was about to take the prescription, a series of tapping sounds from a walking cane echoed from outside the door. The Grand Matriarch had arrived. I turned to look and saw an elderly woman with silver hair and a commanding presence, stepping over the threshold surrounded by a crowd of maids and servants. She was thin, but her eyes were as sharp as a hawk's, sweeping across the room before finally settling on me. This was the true power behind the Zhenbei general's mansion. Huajianting's grandmother, the old matriarch, stepped forward, first sizing Huajianting up and down. Seeing that he was thin but in good spirits, she let out an almost imperceptible sigh of relief. Then she slammed her cane heavily on the ground and turned a cold gaze on me. Yesterday, the Nai family's bridal escorts said the bride's horoscope didn't match and they swapped the person. I was planning to settle accounts with you today, but then I heard you boasted without shame that you would heal his leg, she demanded harshly, each word cutting like a knife. So many skilled physicians in the Imperial Academy were helpless against this illness. If you, a mere slip of a girl, ruin my grandson, can you bear the consequences? Facing the old matriarch's thunderous fury, I did not back down. I knelt in a dignified junior's salute and answered neither humbly nor arrogantly. Please hear me out, Grand Matriarch. The physicians, worried about the general's status, mostly prescribed medicines that were steady and faultless, which actually delayed the treatment. I am not boasting recklessly, but firmly determined that the general is afflicted by the stone Jiu cold. Upon hearing this, a flicker of shock passed through the old matriarch's eyes, and she whipped her head toward Huajianting. Seeing him give a slight nod, her hand gripping the cane involuntarily tightened. Since I dared to speak up, I have prepared to burn my bridges, I said, turning to instruct the maid to bring forward the rosewood box I had brought from the Nye family yesterday. Opening the box, inside lay a 500-year-old ginseng, with intact roots and a lustrous sheen. This ginseng was a dowry left by my biological mother, a rare and priceless tonic for protecting the heart. I will use this as the medicine primer to safeguard the general's heart meridians during acupuncture. I looked the old matriarch straight in the eye, my voice ringing with conviction. Since fate brought me to marry into the general's mansion, I share the same honor and loss as the general. If I fail to cure him, I am willing to be buried with him. The room fell into dead silence. Everyone was stunned by my ruthless and uncompromising resolve. The old matriarch stared into my eyes, trying to find a trace of evasion or guilt, but she found none. After a long moment, the sharpness in her gaze gradually faded, replaced by a heavy sigh. Good, the Nye family has indeed produced a daughter with spirit. The old matriarch yields. I entrust Janting to you. If you truly make him stand again, the position of mistress of this mansion, you will rightfully hold. If not, I will not be lenient. Thank you, grandmother, for your blessing. I lowered my head slightly after the matriarch left. I immediately instructed the maids and Jean Feng to prepare a large wooden tub and firewood. The water for the medicinal bath had to be kept boiling hot at all times, no room for the slightest negligence. Thick white steam rose in the bathing chamber, and the pungent, acrid smell of herbs filled the air. I washed my hands, laid out the arranged golden needles one by one, and looked at Huajanting, who was stripped to the waist and being helped into the scalding medicinal bath by Jean Feng. The first stage of drawing out the poison begins now. Bear with it, General. The scalding medicinal broth churned with a pungent bitterness, and the entire bathing chamber was shrouded in thick white mist, as the 3-inch golden needle pierced the Ming Men acupoint. Huajanting's muscles tensed violently. He clenched his teeth so hard that the veins on his forehead bulged like small snakes, and his hands gripping the edge of the tub turned white at the knuckles, leaving deep indentations in the hard ironwood. This broth contains tugukao and pangolin scales, with an extremely potent medicinal nature that will forcibly drive out the cold toxins stagnating deep in your meridians. Standing outside the tub, I worked swiftly and steadily, inserting silver needles into his Juinshu, Shinshu, and Weishu acupoints on his back. With each needle, Huajanting's body trembled uncontrollably. A low, guttural roar, like that of a wounded beast, escaped his throat, yet he never once struggled to break free. I glanced at him, a flicker of admiration rising in my heart. In my past life, when Chu Mingxian forced poison down my throat, the agony of my internal organs being shredded made me writhe on the ground. But now, the pain Huajanting was enduring was no different from having every tendon and vein in his body snapped and then reknitted, yet he managed to withstand it through sheer willpower. Zhanfeng, add more firewood. The water temperature must not drop, I ordered sternly. Madam, the general. Zhanfeng looked at Huajanting's face, pale as paper yet drenched in cold sweat, his eyes reddening. If he can't even bear this much pain, how can he call himself the general of the northern frontier? Huajanting suddenly opened his eyes, bloodshot from the intense agony, and forced the words out through clenched teeth. Add more firewood. I no longer let myself get distracted. My fingertips steadied as I grasped the longest golden needle and moved around to face him. General, open your mouth. He looked up at me, and I placed a slice of 500-year-old snow ginseng under his tongue. Hold it well to protect your heart meridian. The next needle will pierce your Shinkyu acupoint, and it will hurt a lot. The moment the needle tip sank in, Huajanting jerked his head back and spat out a mouthful of black blood outside the bath. General, Jean Feng was so startled he nearly dropped the bucket of water in his hands. What's the panic? That's just the stagnant poison accumulated in his lungs and organs. I let out a long breath, casually wiping the dense beads of sweat from my forehead with my sleeve, and carefully examined the black blood. It carried a bone-chilling coldness, and as it landed on the blue bricks, a faint layer of frost began to form. The first layer of the poison has finally been forced out. I reached out and took his pulse. The manic energy had mostly dissipated, though his pulse was weak. it was gradually stabilizing. More importantly, the stagnant deathly energy that had been locked in his lower body finally began to flow, however faintly. "General, how do your legs feel now?" I asked softly. Zhanting gasped for breath, taking a long time to calm down before slowly lowering his gaze to his legs submerged in the medicinal bath. After a long moment, he lifted those deep, dark eyes, the emotions barely contained within them threatening to overturn heaven and earth. His voice hoarse, he spoke, "It hurts," just one word, but Zhanfeng was so excited that he threw down the fire tongs with a thud and fell to his knees, wailing loudly, "It hurts, that's good. The imperial physician said numbness means it's hopeless. If it hurts, it means the leg is still alive." I pulled out the golden needles from his body one by one, wiped them clean, and put them back into the needle case. "Today's toxin removal is over. From now on, once every 3 days, supplemented with herbal medicine, I guarantee that within 6 months, the general will be able to stand again." Zhanting said nothing. Only when he stepped out of the wooden tub with Zhanfeng's help, put on a dry cotton robe, and sat back down in the wheelchair did he raise his head to give me a deep look. That gaze no longer held the violent suspicion of last night. Instead, it carried a newfound seriousness, one that truly acknowledged me as an ally on the same side. "I won't forget that you saved me today." His voice was low and hoarse. "The general is gravely ill. It's merely a matter of each taking what they need," I said calmly, turning to wash my hands. "As I said, as long as he doesn't treat me as a pawn to be discarded, I will naturally ensure his life is spared." Over the next 2 days, the general's mansion was unusually quiet. Seeing that Zhanting's complexion had visibly improved, old Madame Hua sent a large batch of precious medicinal herbs overnight. Even the servants in the mansion shifted their gaze toward me from initial disdain to reverence. Soon it was the 3rd day, which, by tradition, was the day for the bride to return to her family home. At dawn, the maid helped me dress and apply makeup. She opened the jewelry box and rummaged through it for a long time, then bit her lip indignantly. "Miss, that Jew woman is truly stingy. She claims to have sent you fine accessories, but they're all old-fashioned and mismatched. How will you hold your head high when you return home today?" I looked at my reflection in the mirror, unadorned yet serene and composed, and smiled faintly. "That Jew woman has been in charge for years. She won't easily give up what she's swallowed. She's hoping I'll return home looking shabby today, so she can flaunt how gloriously her precious daughter, Nizalan, has married. In my past life, Nizalan nearly eloped with a playboy after resisting the arranged marriage, causing a citywide scandal. In this life, she took my place and married the gentle and refined new top scholar, Chu Mingxian, and she will surely return to the Nai family today as well. Put on the golden-laid kingfisher hairpin that old Madame Hua sent yesterday, I instructed. Today, we're not going back to be humiliated. It's time to reclaim my mother's shops and land deeds. With interest, I had everything prepared, and just as I stepped out of the main courtyard, I saw a large, steady black iron carriage parked outside the gate, with beast-patterned bronze bells hanging from the 4 corners bearing the insignia of the general's mansion, imposing and majestic. Beside the carriage, Zhanfeng was pushing a wheelchair. Today, Zhanting had changed into a dark black robe with gold cloud patterns, his long hair tied up high with a jade crown. His face was still gaunt, but the oppressive aura honed from countless battles made it hard to look him directly in the eye. I paused slightly and walked over. "Are you going out, General?" I had originally thought that with his leg condition and in the critical period of detoxification, he would prefer not to go out and show himself in public. Today, I was prepared to face the pack of wolves in the Nai family alone. Zhanting turned the wooden wheel and stopped in front of me, his deep black eyes locking onto mine. "When the wife returns home, how can the husband miss it?" His tone was indifferent but carried an undeniable dominance. "Since the Nai family dared to treat you as a substitute and send you off to the general's mansion, today I will accompany you to see just how high the threshold of the Nai family really is." Zhanfeng swiftly set down the carriage stepboard and laughed. "Milady, please. Our general says the matriarch of the general's mansion should not be belittled by others." I couldn't help but smile genuinely, not holding back, and helped by the maid, I boarded the carriage. "Since you have the interest, General," I said, my voice clear through the carriage curtains, "then let me present you a good show today." In front of the crimson gate of the Nye residence, the street was so quiet you could hear falling leaves. When the General's mansion's black iron carriage, with its bronze beast bells, came to a halt, the steward waiting at the gate on orders to welcome guests had trembling legs and scrambled inside to report by the time I stepped down from the carriage. With the maid's help, Nye Boyuan and his stepmother, Madame Ju, had already come out to greet me. Their faces still held shock and panic they hadn't had time to conceal. In their plans, the abandoned substitute who replaced Nye Zelan would either have been beaten to death by that violent, crippled general or be half dead from torment. Yet I not only dressed neatly, but even the gold-inlaid kingfisher feather hairpin on my head didn't so much as tremble, and the man who followed behind me, slowly emerging in a wheelchair pushed by Jeanfeng, though seated on the wooden wheels, his dark black robe with gold cloud patterns and his cold, chiseled face exuded a murderous aura so intense that no one in front of the Nye residence dared to even breathe heavily. "I, your subordinate. Greet the general who pacifies the north," Nye Boyuan, though serving in the Imperial Academy of Medicine and holding the fourth-rank post of vice commissioner, hurriedly stepped forward to bow when he saw Hua Zhanting arrive in person. Hua Zhanting lifted his eyelids slightly, his gaze sweeping over Nye Boyuan like a cold star, and without telling him to rise, merely uttered two indifferent words. "No need." Those two words alone sent cold sweat beading on Nye Boyuan's forehead, and the father-in-law airs he had intended to put on shattered into dust in an instant. I sneered inwardly, but kept a gentle and proper smile on my face. Following Hua Zhanting's side as we stepped into the Nye family's main hall, two people were already seated inside. Nye Zelan, clad in a magnificent gold-embroidered robe of deep red peonies and adorned with a head full of pearls and jewels, was quietly murmuring with the newly appointed Tanhua, Chu Mingxian, who sat beside her with a refined demeanor. As we entered, Nye Zelan's hand holding the teacup gave a violent start, splashing scalding tea onto the back of her hand, yet she swallowed even the cry of pain forcefully. Glaring at me, she probably couldn't believe that I was still alive, and carrying myself with such composure. "Big sister has suffered," little sister thought I wouldn't see you today. Nye Zelan stood up, forcing a stiff smile, her opening words already laced with thorns. My gaze fell on her face, though she had deliberately applied a thick layer of jade powder today and coated her lips with the brightest shade. I could see at a glance that the dark circles under her eyes betrayed an inescapable weariness. Even in her smile, her posture carried a strained stiffness from holding herself up. In my past life, I had also been this exhausted on the day of my return visit after marrying into the Chu family. Chu Mingxian was known to the outside world as gentle as jade, but the back chambers of the Chu household were a veritable quagmire, with a mother-in-law who was extremely strict about propriety and skilled at grinding down her daughter-in-law, and a frail, sickly cousin who had been raised in the Chu family since childhood, growing up with Chu Mingxian. On the wedding night, that cousin's heart pain had flared up, and Chu Mingxian abandoned his bride, not returning all night. The next day during the tea offering ceremony, his mother punished me for lacking respect by making me stand through an entire day of meal service. Now it seemed that this blessing, Nye Zelan had received every bit of it, without missing a thing. "My sister is worrying over nothing. I am doing perfectly well at the general's residence." I walked over slowly, regarding her with a faint, ambiguous smile. "But as for my sister, newlywed, why do I see dark circles under your eyes? Could it be that the rules in the Chu family are too strict, and you haven't been able to rest well these past few days?" At these words, Nye Zelan's face changed slightly, a flicker of embarrassment passing through her eyes. Chu Mingxian also gave an awkward cough, picking up his teacup to mask his discomfort. Seeing this, Lady Ju quickly stepped in to smooth things over, raising her voice. "What nonsense are you talking about, girl? Your sister is cherished like the apple of their eye in the Chu family. Mingxian is such a considerate child, and the old Madame Chu is nothing but kind. How could it compare to your general's residence?" Nye Boyuan coughed heavily, desperately signaling to Lady Ju. Only then did she suddenly remember that the fearsome figure was still seated in the hall. The second half of her sentence got stuck in her throat, and she turned purple with suppressed anxiety. Huajianting, seated in the place of honor, toyed with the black jade thumb ring on his thumb without lifting his head, his voice cold and deep. What about the general's residence? Mother-in-law might as well finish what you were saying. Lady Ju's knees went weak with fear, and she stammered, "No, nothing. I meant to say the general's residence is dignified, to save face." Nizalan ground her teeth and swallowed her pride, forcing a smile as she pressed forward. "Mother is right. My husband treats me extremely well, and my mother-in-law has even handed over the household keys to me. My life is perfectly smooth, eldest sister. Don't judge me with your own suspicions." I looked at the faint red mark on her neck that her collar didn't quite cover, the mark of scalding tea splashed there. In my past life, I too had endured a cup of tea thrown by Lady Chu. I gave a slight smile, lowering my voice to a volume only she could hear, and said, "Is that so? Then has cousin Liu's heart pain been any better these past few days?" Nizalan's pupils contracted sharply, as if struck by lightning. She stared at me, her hands hidden in her sleeves clenching tightly, the nail guards nearly snapping in her palms. But my return today wasn't just to mock her. I turned to face Yuan and Madame Ju, whose expressions were varied, and spoke unhurriedly yet with each word crisp and clear. "Father, mother, aside from paying my respects today, I have another matter to attend to. 3 days ago, due to a clash in our horoscopes, my sister and I exchanged marriage arrangements. It was sudden, and the dowry I brought upon leaving the household was the one my sister had originally prepared. Now that our statuses have been settled, I wish to take back everything that belonged to my late mother's dowry and bring it to the general's estate." Before my voice had even faded, Madame Ju jumped up like a cat whose tail had been stepped on. "What? Your mother's dowry, her family, has long passed away, and those shops and estates she left behind have lost so much over the years that they're almost worthless. Now you come back today to demand an accounting of the money spent on your food and clothing in this household." I did not lose my temper, but calmly took out a yellowed dowry deed. "You have a poor memory, mother, but I have kept the dowry list from when my mother married into the family, stamped with the official seal. If you doubt it, just summon the accountant to verify it." Yuan's face turned ashen, and he suppressed his anger as he scolded, "Nai Qing, you get married and then come back to your maiden home demanding money and property. What kind of behavior is that? I'm not dead yet, and this Nai family is not for you to settle monthly accounts." At this, Huajianting, who had remained silent all along, suddenly spoke. He slowly raised his eyes, his pitch-black pupils exuding a chilling pressure. "My wife claiming her late mother's belongings is perfectly justified. Could it be that the Nai family not only dares to use the eldest daughter as a substitute bride to deceive this general, but now also intends to embezzle the dowry of the deceased wife?" He let out a cold laugh, his tones suddenly sharpening like metal striking stone. "Zhanfeng, take this list to the Jingzhou prefecture. Tell them that this general wants to sue physician Nai for failing to govern his household strictly, favoring the concubine over the wife, and while at it, investigate what punishment this deception of the general's mansion with a substitute bride deserves." "Hold on, General, please calm your anger." Yuan, terrified out of his wits, fell to his knees with a thud. The matter of the substitute bride was already his fault. If it truly escalated to the Jingzhou prefecture or even the imperial court, his official position would be lost. Between his career and money, he knew which mattered more. He abruptly turned and slapped Jusha hard across the face. "Foolish woman, go and fetch all the dowry deeds and warehouse keys of the eldest Mrs. Late mother immediately. If even one item is missing, I'll divorce you." Jusha was knocked to the ground by the slap, covering her face and wailing, but dared not disobey. Beside her, Nizalan watched the scene, her face pale as paper, the dignity she had maintained as the wife of a Tanhua scholar now shattered into dust. I stood silently in place, watching this group of so-called blood relatives who had devoured me in my past life now in such a disheveled and pathetic state, with not a Single ripple in my eyes as the last golden needle stained with a trace of black blood was pulled from the Weizhong acupoint. I let out a long, slow breath and placed the needle into a bowl of strong liquor. The last remnants of poison in the general's meridians have been completely cleansed. I took a silk cloth to wipe my hands and looked up at Huazhanting, who was seated on the bed. Over the course of half a year, after countless sessions of medicinal baths and acupuncture that felt like having his tendons ripped out and bones scraped, his once pale and sickly face had regained the stern, heroic bearing befitting a military commander. In those deep-set eyes, there was no longer any trace of the manic, deathly aura from the beginning. Instead, it had been replaced by a sharp, piercing edge that made it hard to look directly at him. Huazhanting lowered his gaze to his own legs, pressing his hands on his knees, his knuckles turning white from the strain. After taking a deep breath, he suddenly exerted force through his arms, and his tall, robust frame slowly rose from the bed. Without anyone's help, without the support of a wheelchair, he stood firmly on the blue bricks with both feet, straightening his body like a legendary weapon long sheathed in dust, finally unsheathed at this moment. Beside him, Zhanfeng was so moved that he tightly covered his mouth, tears streaming from his eyes. Yet he dared not make a single sound to disturb the moment. Huazhanting turned around and looked down at me from his height. This was the first time in half a year that he had not called me madam but instead used my name. In those eyes, always so cold and sharp, there now surged a deep, unfathomable emotion that I could not read. Nai Qing, you have not only saved my life but also preserved the soul of the Zhenbei army. For this great kindness, I, entrust my life to you. Meeting his gaze, my heart trembled slightly, but I merely gave a gentle smile and handed him the robe lying nearby. General, you speak too harshly. Husband and wife are one. If you were to fall, I would have no way to survive either. Since you have now recovered, it's time to close the net. Huazhanting took the robe and put it on, his eyes instantly turning cold as murderous intent surged around him. Zhanfeng, what is the situation outside? Zhanfeng immediately composed himself, kneeling on one knee as he replied, General, Madam, everything has unfolded as the Madam predicted. Over the past 6 months, Chu Mingxian has encountered setbacks everywhere in the Hanlin Academy. To climb up the ranks, he has secretly aligned himself with the second prince. These past few days, he has been frequently visiting the estates of the second prince's subordinates. The mastermind behind the assassination attempt against you on the border half a year ago, using the stone Gu cold poison arrows, is none other than the second prince. At the winter solstice palace banquet, the grand hall was filled with the unceasing sounds of strings and flutes. Male and female guests were separated by 12 huge, intricately carved purple sandalwood screen panels depicting clouds and dragons. Dressed in the formal attire of a noted lady of the third rank, I sat at the foremost seat on the women's side. While the wives and noble women around me maintained polite faces, most looked at me with a hint of pity. In their eyes, Huazhanting was not long for this world, and my current glory was but a fleeting illusion. Bang! Suddenly, a heavy thud echoed from outside the hall, followed by the abrupt halt of the music. From beyond the screen in the front hall, Chu Mingxian knelt sharply before the emperor, his voice piercing with a desperate, all-or-nothing frenzy. Your subject risks death to disturb your majesty. I impeach the general of the Northern Pacification, Huazhanting, for secretly colluding with the enemy and plotting rebellion. His wife, under the guise of visiting the Daxiangguo temple for incense yesterday, secretly attempted to transfer evidence of his treason, which I intercepted on the spot. I beg your majesty to investigate. At these words, the hall fell into an instant, deathly silence. The noble ladies and wives among the womenfolk were so terrified that their faces drained of color, and they scrambled backward in retreat, leaving me isolated at the very front. Presumptuous, the emperor on the dragon throne slammed his wine goblet to the ground. Treason is a crime punishable by the extermination of 9 generations. Chu Mingxian, do you know what you are saying? Summon Huazhanting and Nai Shi to come forward and answer the imperial decree. Your servant obeys the decree. I smoothed my wide sleeves, rose with a composed expression, and, guided by 2 palace attendants, walked around the screen into the brightly lit, peril-laden front hall. Huazhanting's wheelchair was stopped just below the jade steps. As I approached, he gave me a slight nod, his deep eyes filled with a reassuring steadiness. Chu Mingxian held high the purple sandalwood box intercepted from the great Xianghua temple, his eyes glancing at me with undisguised smugness and malice. In my past life, he used that same sanctimonious demeanor to coax me into drinking poisoned wine. In this life, he has finally, impatiently, walked down this dead-end path. Your Majesty, this is the irrefutable evidence that Lady Nai attempted to smuggle out yesterday, Chu Mingxian declared loudly. The second prince can also testify. Even I never imagined that this box contained the secret letters of her illicit correspondence with forces beyond the passes. The second prince immediately stepped forward, his face full of anguish. Father, Huazhanting commands a massive army, yet harbors such treacherous ambition. If he is not severely punished, the stability of the realm will be in jeopardy. I watched them perform their duet in silence, then suddenly spoke, Your Majesty. Please allow me to explain. Yesterday, I did indeed go to the great Xianghua temple, but it was because I received a letter written in blood from my second sister, begging for help, saying that Lord Chu dotes on his concubine and mistreats his lawful wife. As for this box, I have never even seen it. Since Lord Chu claims this is irrefutable evidence of treason, why not open it in public, so that I may die knowing the truth, at the brink of death, and still you dare to quibble? Chu Mingxian sneered coldly. The emperor's face was ashen, and he said in a deep voice, Li Dequan, open the box in front of everyone. The eunuch in charge of the imperial seal, Li Gonggong, quickly walked down the jade steps, pried open the copper lock, and pulled out the letters and account books inside. After just one glance, his already pale face turned as white as paper. He fell to his knees with a thud, his voice trembling like chaff. Your Majesty, the seal on this letter is that of the second prince. It records the second prince's illicit sale of military horses beyond the border and the purchase of the rare stone Jiu cold poison. At these words, the hall erupted in uproar. Impossible. Chu Mingxian, as if struck by lightning, ignored courtly decorum and lunged forward to snatch the letter. As soon as he saw the handwriting, his face turned deathly pale, and he collapsed to the ground. He could not understand how the forged letters of treason belonging to the Hua family, which he had ordered placed in the box, had transformed into evidence of the second prince hiring assassins to murder a great general. It seems that what Lord Chu intercepted was not evidence of our general's mansion's treason, but rather the second prince's death warrant. Huazhanting, who had been sitting silently in his wheelchair, suddenly let out a cold snort. Amid the gasps of the civil and military officials and the noble women behind the screen, he slowly exerted himself, and his tall, robust frame stood steadily upright. Beneath his dark official robes, his back was straight as a pine, and he took a steady step forward, the fierce aura of a battle-hardened general who had survived countless near-death experiences instantly pouring forth. Your legs aren't crippled, your poison has been cured. The second prince's eyes bulged wide as if he had seen a ghost, retreating 3 steps in succession, utterly losing his composure. If I hadn't pretended to be ill and refused to leave my residence, how could the second prince and Lord Chu have let their guard down and shown their true colors? Huazhanting only lifted his robe to the emperor and knelt heavily. Half a year ago, I was ambushed and poisoned with a rare toxin, barely escaping death. After months of secret investigation, I finally obtained evidence of the second prince's treasonous collusion with the enemy and his framing of loyal officials. Coincidentally, Lord Chu had sent men to secretly monitor my wife, so I played along, allowing Lord Chu to personally intercept this box and present it before your Majesty. That is the truth of the deadly scheme. Chu Mingxian thought he was the mantis catching the cicada, unaware he was merely the fool who delivered the evidence to your Majesty's throne in a seemingly legitimate manner. The emperor trembled with rage, pointing at the second prince and shouting, Wretch, what do you have to say for yourself? At that moment, the Imperial Guard commander strode in from outside the hall. Your Majesty, Chu Mingxian brought Lady Chu, Nai Zilan, to the palace gates yesterday to testify. upon hearing the commotion in the hall, she suddenly cried out, demanding an audience with your majesty, and submitted a written accusation. Bring her in. A moment later, a gaunt and bruised Nizalan was escorted into the hall. She had long lost the dignity of a Tanhua's wife and the daughter of the imperial hospital chief. Seeing the imposing Hua Zhanting and then the paralyzed Chu Mingxian, her eyes blazed with intense venom and madness. Your Majesty, I submit a written accusation. Chu Mingxian conspired with my father, Nai Boyuan, and the second prince. Not only did Chu Mingxian torment me in his household, but he also bribed my father to steal forbidden drugs from the imperial hospital. I will confess everything, begging only that your Majesty execute this villain. She wept and screamed hysterically, laying bare all the crimes of Chu Mingxian and the Nai family in her past life. It was a blessed marriage she schemed to steal, but in this life, it became not only an Avachi hell of trapped torment but also a sharp blade of backlash. I lowered my gaze and watched coldly at this spectacle of dogs biting dogs, my heart utterly calm without a ripple. On the day of the substitute marriage, I had already said, when heaven's retribution strikes, it can be endured, but when one brings disaster upon themselves, there is no escape. With the emperor's thunderous decree, the second prince was stripped of his rank and confined in the clan court, while Chu Mingxian and Nai Boyuan were cast into death row to await execution in autumn. Nizalan was exiled 3,000 li as a convict. The bloody vendetta from the past life was finally completely settled amidst this severe upheaval in the court. As the banquet ended and I left the palace, the first winter snow of this year began to fall on the long street. Standing beneath the vermilion palace gate, I looked up at the flurry of snowflakes. The piercing chill from the poisoned wine in my past life finally melted away completely from every part of my body at this moment. The snow is getting heavier, milady. Take care not to catch a cold. A sable fur cloak, carrying the scent of ambergris and a coldness, was draped over my shoulders. Hua Zhanting unfurled a green bamboo umbrella, shielding me from the wind and snow. His usually icy face now bore a rare tenderness, enough to melt even the frost. Your Excellencies, great kindness and trust. I have no idea how I will ever repay you in this lifetime. I turned to look at him, my brows and eyes carrying an unprecedented lightness and radiance. He let out a low chuckle, then took the opportunity to grasp my slightly cool hand hidden in my sleeve. Intertwining our fingers tightly, the rough calluses on the warrior's palm rubbed against the back of my fingers, radiating a reassuring warmth. The realm is settled, and the grievances have been redressed. If my lady truly wishes to repay me, he leaned in slightly, his voice low and fervent, in the decades to come, we have a lifetime to slowly settle this account. Snow filled the sky as he led me across the bluestone street, without a single pause, heading toward the Northern Pacification General's residence. In this life, there would be no more gloom, only a long road walked hand in hand, with years free from worry. After hearing the first story above, what are your thoughts? Feel free to share your opinions in the comments section. Next, there is another similar story. Let's continue to see. The princess took a fancy to my husband, who politely declined her advances on the grounds that he was already married. The next day, the princess threw my severed head at my husband's feet. Now, you have no family. Without shedding a single tear, my husband picked up my head and boarded the princess's carriage. The princess had no idea that what she had taken was the most fearsome secret sorcerer in the Central Plains. The moment the carriage curtain was pulled open, I followed Song Shu and slipped inside. The princess sat opposite Song Shu, looking at the severed head with a face full of disgust. You've already agreed to come back to my residence with me, so why are you still holding on to that filthy thing? Song Shu smiled gently. Yun Yang and I were once husband and wife. It is only right that I see her off on her final journey. The princess grew somewhat wary. Are you blaming me for killing her? Song Shu shook his head. I fear that without a proper burial, her spirit might linger in this world and haunt your highness. I nearly fainted from anger. Damn man, I just died and you're already trying to win the princess over like this. I was furious, but the princess was in a great mood. With a wave of her jade-like hand, she said, all right, I'll have you escorted out of the city, bury her, and from now on, you will serve me wholeheartedly. Song Shu lowered his head and replied obediently, "Yes, Your Highness." I kicked Song Shu hard, my translucent foot passing right through his body. He didn't notice a thing. I'm already dead, I can't kick him anymore, forget it. Since he was willing to bury me, I won't hold it against him. After the princess killed me, she burned my body, leaving only my head. Only after Song Shu buried my head could I rest in peace and be reincarnated. It's just that in this lifetime, we spent so little time together, and now to part forever, I really feel a bit reluctant. It's not that I'm love struck, it's just that Song Shu is too handsome. I drifted to his side, gently resting my head on his shoulder, gazing reluctantly at his handsome profile. As if sensing something, he turned his head, and his lips brushed against my forehead. The carriage traveled to the hills outside the city. Stopping before a bamboo grove, Song Shu carried my head and got off the carriage alone. While the princess lifted the curtain and urged him to hurry, I followed behind Song Shu, turning back to stick my tongue out at the princess. "You wicked woman, if I weren't afraid of not being able to reincarnate, I'd definitely turn into a vengeful ghost and scare you to death." Song Shu walked deep into the bamboo grove, cut off a piece of his robe with a knife, and carefully placed my head on it. "Good lad. You've got a bit of a conscience after all, you didn't just toss me on the ground." I drifted to his side and glanced at the head lying on the ground. His hair was a mess, his face smeared with blood. "So ugly," I sighed and grumbled, complaining that he hadn't even bothered to clean me up. He couldn't hear me, he was just focused on digging holes in the open space. No knife, no shovel, just his bare hands. Soon, the small hole grew deeper, and his hands became covered in blood. I was so anxious that I stomped on his knife twice. "Oh, you have a knife after all." He still couldn't hear, he continued digging with his hands. Soon, the hole was dug. Song Shu lifted my head, carefully combing out the knots in my hair one by one. "All right, that's somewhat caring." As he combed, he suddenly spoke to himself. "Yuna, tell me, how did she kill you?" I scoffed. "If you have the guts, go ask the princess." "What's the point of asking my head? My head can't talk." I plopped down beside him, fuming, and said, "How else could they have killed me?" They grabbed my hair, slapped me several times across the face, then ordered their underlings to chop off my head with a single stroke. Even that wasn't enough to satisfy them. They dragged my body away and burned it too. Song Shu didn't react, still focused on combing my hair. "So annoying, you can't even hear me, so why bother asking?" Soon, he tidied all the hair from my forehead, revealing my slightly swollen cheek. He gently stroked my face, then softly kissed my bruised lips. "Yuna, you've suffered." I kicked him again. "Big brother, you're about to marry a murderer, so why pretend to be so affectionate?" Unfortunately, Song Shu didn't sense my anger at all. He took off the jade pendant that had never left his side and placed it in front of my forehead. Then, he carefully wrapped my head in his clothes and placed it in the dug pit. Handfuls of yellow earth buried my head. After finishing all this, Song Shu walked out of the bamboo forest without looking back, to embrace his immense wealth. I watched him slowly walk away, silently saying goodbye to him in my heart. Suddenly, a strange force pulled me over. In an instant, I was back by Song Shu's side. I was filled with confusion. Was it a ghost? Wait, that can't be right. I am a ghost myself, and I didn't see any other ghosts. I tried to walk toward my grave again, but as soon as I moved a certain distance away from Song Shu, I was forcefully pulled back to his side. I was utterly confused and racked my brains. I've heard that if someone has lingering attachments after death, their soul will stay by the side of the person they're attached to, refusing to move on. But I have no lingering attachments. Song Shu has already thrown himself into the princess's arms. What's there for me to be attached to? I just want to hurry to the underworld, down the mungpa soup in one gulp, and happily reincarnate. If not because of obsession, then what is it? I glanced back at my grave. A bare little mound of earth, right? It's the tombstone. I don't have a tombstone. That must be why I can't go to the underworld. Damn that Song Shu, rushing back to curry favor with the princess, and he didn't even have time to set up a tombstone for me. "You're the one rushing to be reincarnated, aren't you?" I kicked and cursed at him, but he just smiled and got into the princess's carriage. As soon as she got in the carriage, the princess leaned in with a smile. Song Shu didn't refuse, letting the princess half recline in his arms and take advantage. I couldn't stand it and angrily climbed up to sit on the roof of the carriage. The carriage passed through familiar streets and would soon pass by the Song residence. From afar, I saw two familiar figures. Kneeling at the entrance of the Song residence, crying and shouting, "Give me back my daughter! Give me back my daughter!" Their voices carried from a distance, heart-wrenching and desperate. My heart tightened. It was my parents. I quickly floated over. My parents were dressed in mourning white, kneeling before the Song family's gate, their fists blooded from knocking, but the Song family's gate remained tightly shut, with no one paying them any heed. I wanted to help them up, but my hands just passed through their bodies again and again. I knelt helplessly beside my parents, unsure of what to do to help them. Suddenly, the princess's carriage stopped in front of the mansion. The princess lifted the carriage curtain and said coldly, "What kind of country bumpkin dares to act recklessly in front of the consort's mansion? Guards, take them away and behead them." My heart tightened at the sound, and I rushed to the carriage, cursing loudly. I hadn't cursed for long before my body began to grow hot. Oh no, I'm turning into a vengeful ghost. Once I become a vengeful ghost, I'll seek the princess's life, and if I take a life, I'll never be able to reincarnate again. But if I could save my parents, what does it matter if I can't be reincarnated? I was just planning how to kill the princess when Song Shu suddenly spoke up. "Your Highness, today is our joyous wedding day. It would be best to avoid any bloodshed." The princess's expression immediately softened. She lazily leaned against the carriage window, squinting her eyes. Then, "Tell me, what should we do? Yunyang's parents are country folk. Just drive them back to the countryside and forbid them from ever entering the city again." Song Shu said, "I am willing to handle this matter on your highness's behalf." "Fine, make it quick." The princess lowered the carriage curtain. Song Shu got out of the carriage and walked up to his parents. Upon seeing him, his parents began beating him frantically. "It was you who begged us to marry Yuna to you. After she married you, she spent years alone in an empty room. We finally waited for you to return to the capital, but she died. You heartless man. Give our Yuna back to us." Fists rained down on Song Shu's chest like a downpour, yet he lowered his eyes and remained silent. When I met Song Shu, I was still a country girl. The Song family were minor officials in the capital. Though not a prominent household, they generally looked down on country girls like us. Of course, that was generally speaking. Song Shu and I met in the mountains and fields. He came to enjoy the scenery, while I went up the mountain to gather herbs for my mother. He accidentally fell off a cliff, injured his leg, and was rescued by me as I passed by. I applied herbal medicine to his wound and gave him a flatbread to satisfy his hunger. That flatbread was my food for the entire day. I hadn't eaten all day, yet I stubbornly insisted I wasn't hungry. I admit it was because he was handsome. Later, I carried him down the mountain on my back, left him at the clinic, and departed. I thought it was just a chance encounter, but to my surprise, not long after, he came to my home to propose marriage. My parents thought we were not a good match and dared not agree. He knelt outside the door with the betrothal gifts for a whole day and night. My parents, afraid that something might actually happen to him, hurriedly came to ask me. They asked me if I was willing to marry him. I nodded shyly, my mind filled with his stunningly beautiful face. My parents had no choice but to agree to the marriage. In the early days of our marriage, we were deeply in love, inseparable as glue and lacquer. But the good times didn't last long. A few months later, war broke out on the frontier, and he was chosen to join the army. That departure lasted for 3 years. 3 years later, the Imperial Army returned victorious, with the common people lining the streets to welcome them. Song Shu rode his horse in the middle of the procession, brimming with pride and ambition. I stood among the crowd, looking at his familiar yet unfamiliar face, worried that he might have already forgotten me, but he spotted me at a glance. He leaped off his horse, rushed to my side, and held me tightly in his arms. He said that he had achieved military merits, and the emperor would surely promote him. He said he would build a new mansion and bring my parents into the city. He said he would give me a better life. He said he wanted to grow old with me. After a brief moment of intimacy, I watched him return to the procession, entering the palace to report on his duties. We would have a proper reunion when he returned in the evening. I never expected that what I would end up waiting for was the news that the princess had taken a liking to him and publicly requested the emperor to bestow their marriage. He comforted me, saying the emperor hadn't agreed, and he had personally refused the princess, but I noticed a faint unease in his expression all night. He tossed and turned, holding me, and repeating over and over that I must always stay by his side. I thought he missed me too much, so I smiled and agreed. It wasn't until dawn that he finally fell into a light sleep. I covered him with a blanket and quietly left the room. The hardships of the battlefield must have left him restless and unable to sleep soundly. I want to buy him some calming medicine, but as soon as I stepped out the door, I was killed by the princess on the street. Songshu stood with his head lowered at the entrance of the Song residence, letting his parents beat and scold him. His parents grew tired from hitting him and finally stopped, collapsing to the ground in tears. Songshu called out the servants from the mansion, instructing them to escort his parents out of the city properly. He then whispered something to one of them. I leaned in to listen but couldn't make out what was said. My parents boarded the carriage, and I followed them in. I clung to my mother's arm, wanting to cry, but the tears wouldn't fall. I miss my mother so much. I really want to go home with them. As soon as the carriage moved a little further away, that force once again tugged at my soul. I struggled desperately, but still found myself uncontrollably pulled back to Songshu's side. Then I watched helplessly as my parents disappeared down the long street. I suddenly remembered the days when I lived in the countryside with my parents. Life was simple back then, but every day was filled with joy whenever there was something delicious to eat at home. It was always given to me first, and if there were new clothes, they were bought for me first. The neighbors all urged my parents to have another child, a son, saying that only with a son could they have someone to rely on. My parents said, having Yuna is enough. How could my parents, who love me so much, go on living without me? The more I thought about it, the sadder I became, but a soul cannot shed tears, so I could only howl. I howled and cursed at the same time. Dog of a man, I should never have married you. No, I shouldn't have saved you. I should have let you fall to your death at the bottom of the cliff. Songshu couldn't hear a single word. He just stared intently toward the city gate, a trace of melancholy in his eyes. When night fell, Songshu arrived at the princess's mansion. The princess held Songshu's hand as they alighted from the carriage, and I followed reluctantly behind them. The princess's mansion was truly enormous, more than 10 times the size of the Song residence. Carved railings and jade steps, resplendent and magnificent. No wonder Songshu couldn't resist. Yet, as he gazed at the magnificent palace, there was no trace of joy on his face. What's wrong? You don't seem very happy. The princess pouted and asked him, her delicate face looking pitifully endearing. Songshu shook his head. Your Highness, I just returned to the capital yesterday and am a bit tired. Besides, we are not yet officially betrothed, so it's not appropriate for me to enter your residence so early. The princess held onto Songshu's arm. Oh, what does that matter? I've already told my father about us. He dotes on me, and the imperial decree for our marriage will arrive first thing tomorrow morning. My heart instantly turned cold. The princess killed me and immediately took my head to the Song residence. How could she have had time to discuss it with the emperor unless they had agreed on it yesterday? It turns out that while the emperor did not publicly agree to the princess's request, he privately consented to arrange her marriage. He was well aware that Songshu had a family, so killing me was something the emperor tacitly approved. I always believed His Majesty was a wise ruler, but how could a wise ruler allow his daughter to kill in the streets and forcibly seize another's husband? Songshu, you fought so hard for 3 years for such an emperor. I thought Songshu would be as deeply disappointed as I was, but he didn't seem surprised. Only his fists clenched at his sides, turning white as night fell. Songshu settled into the guest room of the princess's residence. I had thought they would share a room tonight and had deliberately hidden on the roof. It seems the princess isn't one to disregard all rules. The light in Songshu's room remained on, so I drifted down from the roof to see what he was doing. Just as I reached the window, Songshu looked up and glanced in my direction. I was startled, frozen in place. He stared at my face for a long, long time. Then he stood up, walked slowly to the window, and murmured to himself, "The moon tonight is so full. It turned out he was looking at the moon before he went to fight at the border. We had promised to watch the moon together every night. Though we are thousands of miles apart, the moon we gaze upon is the same. At the thought of this, my heart leaps with joy. The bitterness of longing is also diluted by the moonlight in those days. I eagerly looked forward to reuniting with him, leaning together to watch the moon. I never imagined that when we would watch the moon together again, it wouldn't be across 1,000 miles, but across the realms of life and death. Yuna, tell me, is the princess beautiful? Song Shu suddenly spoke to himself. It startled me. I stomped my foot in anger. Everything was fine, and you just had to bring her up. Do you like her that much? Even if she killed me, you'd still like her. Song Shu didn't answer my question. Yes, he can't hear. I can only sulk alone, with no one to vent to. This ghostly existence is truly unbearable for even a single day. Yuna, do you like the princess's appearance? Song Shu spoke again. I rolled my eyes. Brother, she killed me. No matter how beautiful she is, I could never like her. But I have to admit, the princess is truly breathtakingly beautiful. If I had grown up to look like her, would Song Shu feel even a hint of sadness right now? I sighed. With a face like hers, what woman in the world wouldn't admire it? But her heart is far too venomous. You should be careful too. What if one day she grows tired of you, or takes a liking to someone else, and decides to kill you as well? After saying this, I genuinely began to worry. If the princess ever decided to kill Song Shu, what would he do? Who would have thought that while I was worrying about him, he suddenly burst out laughing. Seriously, are you so happy just thinking about the princess's beauty? I'm not playing with you anymore. I shouted angrily and was about to float up to the roof. Song Shu suddenly climbed out the window and walked toward me. I was so frightened that I froze in place. Was it a coincidence, or did he see me? Song Shu reached out his hand and waved it in the air, right above my head. I was terrified. A ghost getting scared by a human, that's embarrassing enough to talk about. Song Shu curled the corner of his mouth into a smile, his pitch-black eyes reflecting a deep, unfathomable cold pool. He leaned close to me and spoke in a voice only I could hear. Yuna, I'll give you her skin, how about that? I widened my eyes. You can see, before I could finish speaking, a piercing scream suddenly came from next door, cutting me off abruptly. Next door was the courtyard where the princess resided. Song Shu's expression changed, and he rushed towards the next room. On the way, he passed straight through my body. I was stunned for a moment, then turned and followed him. Entering the courtyard, I was terrified by the scene before my eyes. The princess, dressed in her nightgown with disheveled hair, sat trembling in the center of the courtyard. A dense crowd surrounded her, closing in step by step. Most of them were dressed in tattered clothes, covered in wounds, and some had half an arm dangling limply in the air. Wait, those aren't people, it's a ghost. I was wondering why I hadn't seen any other ghosts since I died. But I never expected to see so many all at once. The ghosts surrounded the princess, baring their teeth as if they were out for her life. The princess could clearly see them, and she was so frightened that she covered her head and curled up into a ball. Song Shu remained quite calm. He walked towards the princess, and as he passed through the crowd of ghosts, they actually stopped in their tracks, no longer advancing. Song Shu crouched down and helped the princess up. Your Highness, what's wrong? The princess trembled. There are ghosts. Ghosts. Can't you see them? Song Shu looked up and glanced around, shaking his head in confusion. Princess, there are only the two of us in this courtyard. Now it was my turn to be puzzled. He had just said some strange things to me, and I thought he could see me. If he could see me, naturally he could also see all the ghosts in this courtyard. Could it be that he simply can't see me, nor can he see ghosts? Could it be that he was just talking to himself, and by coincidence, happened to look in my direction while doing so? But why would these ghosts avoid him when they see him? Just as I was utterly perplexed, the princess asked the question for me. Why do these ghosts avoid you? They avoid me. Song Shu frowned in thought for a moment, then suddenly seemed to have an epiphany, pulling out a red brocade pouch from his waist. Could it be because of this pouch? What is this? The princess asked. Song Shu replied, when I was on the march in the borderlands, I often had nightmares in the middle of the night. A Western region sorcerer told me that the borderlands are heavy with the karma of killing, and the lingering resentment of the soldiers' souls is what causes my nightmares. I paid a hefty sum to ask for his help, and he gave me this brocade pouch, saying it could protect me from being disturbed by ghosts. I was stunned. Song Shu was plagued by nightmares in the borderlands, so why had he never mentioned it in his letters home? Had his life been so difficult all these years? I was feeling heartbroken when the princess suddenly snatched the pouch from his hand. This pouch is so nice. Let me use it. If your highness wants it, just take it. Everything I have belongs to you. Song Shu smiled with a look of deep affection. Goodness, feeling sorry for men really does bring bad luck. However, the location chosen for the princess's residence should be an area with excellent feng shui. How could there be ghosts causing trouble? Song Shu asked. The princess snorted coldly. They're all just damned lowlifes, not resting in peace even after death. Tomorrow, I'll find a sorcerer to get rid of them all. Song Shu sighed. I'm afraid the night is long, and this small pouch of mine won't last until tomorrow. The princess panicked. What should we do? I learned a bit of ghost exorcising techniques from that Western region sorcerer while on the frontier. Why not let me give it a try? Perhaps I can help ease your highness's worries. Song Shu said. Wow. Song Shu actually picked up some new skills while fighting battles. After obtaining the princess's consent, Song Shu escorted her back to her room, fetched paper and a brush, and sat in the courtyard to draw talismans. Curious, I leaned in to take a look. The lines on the paper were intricate and messy, yet they seemed to have a certain form. Could he actually have some real skills? Would I end up being eliminated by him too? I waved my hand in front of his eyes and said, "Hey, don't you dare kill me." Song Shu ignored me, focusing on drawing the talisman. After a short while, he raised the talisman paper, murmuring incantations under his breath. The princess hid by the window, clutching the brocade pouch tightly. Nervously peering outside, break, with a loud shout from him, I saw a blue light drift toward the princess, enveloping her entire body. The ghosts looked at each other, showing no reaction. What's this? Not a single ghost was exorcised. He really is a half-baked amateur. Just as I thought he had failed to drive away the ghosts, the princess suddenly cried out joyfully. They're all gone, all gone. How wonderful. Song Shu turned back and smiled at the princess. I have eliminated all the ghosts, so you can rest assured. Good, good. Tonight, you will guard my door. If any other ghosts come, you must get rid of them all for me. The princess said. All right. Song Shu listened to her words and obediently sat by the door. Their back and forth conversation left me utterly dumbfounded. The ghosts are all standing properly in the courtyard. Where have they gone? Miss, were you also killed by the princess? A clear voice rang in my ear. I shuddered and turned around to see a girl with a pale but very delicate face. I nodded. I was killed by the princess. Were you too? The girl sighed. We all were. Other ghosts, seeing us talking, gathered around, each chiming in with their own grievances. That day, I didn't get out of the way of the princess's carriage in time, and she killed me. I was even more outrageous. I wore a yellow dress, and the princess had her guards stab me to death, saying yellow was ugly. Ah, we're all unfortunate souls. I just bought a candied hawthorn for my daughter, and the princess killed both me and my daughter, saying that when she was young, the emperor wouldn't let her eat candied hawthorn. Hearing this, I understood. So, these delicate young women, ordinary passers-by, pitiful mother and child, were all innocent souls who had fallen under the princess's blade. To the princess, we are but lowly commoners, yet we are all earnestly living our lives. Yet, even the right to live, she cruelly seeks to strip away. Power is such a strange thing. It draws people in like moths to a flame, yet it can turn them into something more terrifying than ghosts. Have you gathered here to demand the princess's life? I asked the girl. If we could take her life, that would be good, of course. But if a ghost takes the life of a living person, they can no longer enter the cycle of reincarnation. The girl said, we just wanted to scare her and also seek justice for ourselves. I was puzzled, but judging by the princess's reaction, she probably hasn't seen ghosts before. Why did you all choose tonight to scare her? We've been here for a long time. The girl said, in the past, the princess had a barrier that repelled ghosts, so we couldn't get close to her, and she couldn't see us. It was only tonight, after she brought that man back from outside, that the barrier broke. That's why she was so terrified by us. It wasn't until just now, when the man placed a talisman on her, that her barrier was restored, I lowered my head and fell into deep thought. The man the girl mentioned was clearly Song Shu. As soon as Song Shu arrived, the princess's barrier broke. Could it be that Song Shu had done something? The talisman Song Shu drew for the princess could only restore her ghost-repelling barrier. So why did he lie to the princess? Claiming he had already eliminated all the ghosts, I looked toward the door, where Song Shu was sitting upright on the brocade mat prepared by the princess, his eyes slightly closed as if truly turning a blind eye to a courtyard full of ghosts. What about that man? Can you get close to him? I pointed at Song Shu. The girl shook her head. He also has a ghost-repelling barrier around him. But that barrier doesn't come from the sachet he gave the princess. Well, Song Shu really didn't tell the princess the whole truth. What on earth does he want to do? I crouched down in front of him and waved my hand in front of his eyes. Song Shu opened his eyes but didn't look at me. I decided to try to trick him. Hey! Song Shu, stop pretending. I know you can see me. Song Shu stared at the ground, ignoring me. If you keep ignoring me, I'll tell all these ghosts about how you fell off the cliff. Song Shu still ignored me. Song Shu, I'm angry. I'm going to turn into a vengeful ghost and kill both you and the princess. I bared my teeth and claws to scare him. Song Shu closed his eyes. He started snoring. Song Shu. To test Song Shu, I shouted and screamed beside him all night long. He slept incredibly soundly. I concluded, Song Shu talking to me last night was purely a coincidence. He simply couldn't see me. I also discovered that I am somewhat different from other ghosts. Other ghosts cannot approach the princess or Song Shu, but I am completely unaffected and can even pass through their bodies. Moreover, these ghosts can wander to other places besides the princess's residence. Yet, if I stray too far from Song Shu, I am forcefully pulled back. Could it be that my soul has also been tampered with? By day, the spirit's mental energy wanes, and they all retreat to dark corners to rest. Only I am forced to wander within a few dozen feet of Song Shu, like a dog tied to a post, unable to roam freely. I simply entered the princess's room. I really want to see what Song Shu's attitude towards the princess is. It would have been better not to look, because when I did, I almost died of anger. Song Shu woke up early in the morning and immediately ran to the princess's bedside, staring straight at her. Pervert. By the time the sun was high in the sky, the princess finally woke up seeing Song Shu. The princess paused for a moment, then beamed at him with a radiant smile. Did you stay by my side all night? Song Shu smiled as well. Yes, fortunately, no more foul creatures came to disturb your highness this night. I rolled my eyes. This guy fell asleep after sitting for just a while. Yet he still has the nerve to say he stayed up all night. I never realized before how smooth talking he is. But the princess didn't know. She was deeply moved, gazing affectionately at Song Shu, her beautiful eyes seeming to well up with clear spring water. If I hadn't been killed by her, I might have truly thought she was a beautiful and kind person. Everyone knows it's wrong to judge people by their appearance, but unfortunately, no one can escape it. Just as I can't escape Song Shu can't escape the princess. After exchanging affectionate glances for a while, the princess suddenly pressed her hand to her forehead. Song Shu, I don't know why, but I feel so tired. I have no strength left in my body. Song Shu's brows furrowed with concern. Your highness is unwell. Should we summon the imperial physician from the palace to examine you? The princess nodded. That would be good. If my father knows I'm not feeling well, he will surely be very distressed for me. It was well known to everyone that the princess was favored by the emperor. However, I never could have imagined that this favor would include indulging his daughter in the wanton killing of the innocent in the afternoon. The imperial physician arrived. After examining her for a while, he found nothing wrong and only said that the princess had been frightened. She just needed to take some calming medicine and rest in bed. After the physician left, the princess got up and had lunch with Song Shu, then went back to lie down on the couch. Song Shu personally brewed the medicine for the princess, fed it to her, and coaxed her to sleep. Looking at Song Shu's obedient demeanor, I sighed, oh gods, if there truly is a next life. Let me be a princess too. I don't know if it was an illusion, but I saw Song Shu's figure pause for a moment. Not long after, the princess fell asleep. and Song Shu got up and went to the writing desk. He plopped right down on my head. "Hey, can't you see there's someone here?" I grumbled and shifted to the side. Sitting down next to him, Song Shu pulled a book from his sleeve and began flipping through it. I leaned over to take a look. "Oh, it's the storybook I've been reading lately in life." My favorite pastime was reading storybooks. After we got married, Song Shu often accompanied me to the street to buy new storybooks. Later, when he went off to war, I would read storybooks whenever I missed him. Immersed in the world of storybooks, I could temporarily forget about him. The day he returned, I mentioned to him the new storybook I had bought. Unfortunately, I died before I could finish reading it. I never expected that Song Shu would actually bring that storybook to the princess's residence. Well, I'm dead, and instead of burning the storybook for me, you kept it for yourself." I fiercely pounded Song Shu 3 times. Song Shu opened the storybook, inside of which was a bookmark I had made from leaves. Song Shu stared intently at the bookmark for a moment, then pulled it out. I thought he would flip to the first page, but instead, he started reading directly from the page where the bookmark was placed. I was overjoyed, happily leaning my head on his shoulder as we watched. Together, he slowly turned the pages, the evening light falling between his slender fingers, just as I did when I was alive. Throughout the entire day, aside from eating meals and taking medicine, the princess remained in a deep slumber. Thanks to her, I spent the whole day reading storybooks. Early the next morning, an imperial decree arrived at the princess's residence. It stated that the emperor, concerned for the princess's health, had decided to postpone the wedding. He also ordered Song Shu to return to the Song residence first and come back only after the princess had recovered. Upon hearing the news, the princess went into a frenzy, clamoring to see the emperor, determined to keep Song Shu by her side. Song Shu patiently coaxed the princess from the side, urging her to listen to her father. The princess grew even angrier. "What do you know? Father dotes on me the most. He will surely agree." Song Shu sighed and brought over the medicine bowl. "Your Highness, the medicine will grow cold. Please drink it first before thinking about the marriage arrangement." Who would have thought that the princess would take the medicine bowl and hurl it at Song Shu? Song Shu had no time to dodge, and the medicine bowl struck him squarely in the face. Dark green medicinal liquid slowly trickled down his face, and a fine line of blood emerged from his handsome features. That was my favorite face. I was furious and pointed at the princess. "Hey, what are you doing? He was just trying to help you. Why are you hitting people?" The princess couldn't hear me. She glared angrily at Song Shu, not showing a hint of remorse on her face at that moment. It suddenly struck me that the princess didn't truly like Song Shu. Perhaps she just thought he was good-looking and wanted to have some fun. But she was publicly rejected and lost face. Face is the most cherished thing among the powerful and wealthy. It was precisely Song Shu's rejection that made her determined to get him by any means necessary. I suddenly felt a bit worried about the second half of Song Shu's life with a wife like that. He must be having a hard time. Song Shu, however, had a very good temper. He wiped his face and said, "I'm sorry for upsetting your highness. The medicine is gone. I'll go prepare another bowl for you." I couldn't help but sneer. Why should I worry about such a spineless man? Who would have thought the princess's next words would immediately wipe the smile off my face? I know, it must be that Yun Niang's doing this. As soon as I killed her, the mansion started haunting. I'm going to send someone to find Yun Niang's parents and have them killed too. I jumped up in an instant. Your mansion is haunted because of your own evil deeds. What does that have to do with me? What right do you have to kill my parents? The princess couldn't hear me. She really called the guards and ordered them to kill my parents. I panicked, tugging on Song Shu's sleeve. Song Shu, talk some sense into her. I knew he couldn't hear me. But he had helped my parents out of trouble yesterday. So surely he would help them today too. That's what I was hoping for. Yet not a single ripple of emotion appeared on Song Shu's face. He said expressionlessly, "As long as your highness is happy, you may kill those troublesome commoners as you please." I froze on the spot. Fine. So speaking up for my parents yesterday wasn't sincere after all. Saying that I have suffered and wanting to give me her skin is not sincere. Song Shu, I will become a vengeful ghost and kill both you and the princess. As soon as this thought arose, my entire body grew feverish. I knew this was the precursor to becoming a vengeful ghost. It's okay, it's fine if I can't be reincarnated. Although this life was short, being able to be my parents' daughter was the best life I could have. Just as I was about to take action against the princess, Song Shu suddenly raised his hand and gently waved it in front of my eyes. I instantly lost consciousness. When I woke again, I had no idea how much time had passed. Song Shu was sitting in the front hall of the princess's residence, while I lay sprawled on the floor beside him. I slowly sat up, my mind a complete muddle. What's going on? I remembered the princess saying she would kill my parents, and Song Shu hadn't helped me. I was furious and planned to turn into a vengeful ghost to kill them, but just before I transformed into a vengeful ghost, I suddenly fainted. Can ghosts even faint? I touched my head, and my fingers passed right through. I am but a wisp of a soul, without a body, let alone a head. Suddenly, footsteps echoed from outside the door. The princess entered, arm in arm with a stern-looking middle-aged man. Before I could even get a clear look at the man's face, Song Shu smoothly dropped to his knees. Your humble servant pays respects to your majesty. So this is the legendary emperor. Why has he come to the princess's residence? How long have I been unconscious? My parents, have they already been killed? With doubts in mind, I decided not to act for now and see what would happen. The emperor took his seat in the main position of the front hall, with the princess sitting beside him. Father, my health has improved greatly. Please grant me permission to marry. The princess clung to the emperor's arm, pleading with teary eyes that looked pitiful and endearing. The emperor's face darkened. Are you determined to have him as your consort? The princess wept, tears streaming down her face. Father, I truly love Song Shu. Look, when the princess's residence was haunted, it was Song Shu who resolved it. When I was frightened, he was the one who took care of me. What he did, the sorcerers under my command could also do. The emperor said sorcerers. The emperor actually had sorcerers under his command. That's right. The princess herself has a ghost-repelling barrier, and such a thing couldn't possibly be innate. Since the emperor has sorcerers under his command, why not send them to completely eliminate the ghosts in the princess's mansion? This doubt only lasted for a moment before I figured it out. Killing people is a common occurrence for the princess, so the ghosts in her mansion can never be completely eradicated. Setting up a ghost-repelling barrier for her is indeed a permanent solution. However, the sorcerer who works for the emperor must be exceptionally skilled. If he's so skilled, how could the princess's barrier have been broken? I couldn't help but glance at Song Shu. Could it be that he did it? The emperor and the princess were at a stalemate, but Song Shu remained composed and silent. In the end, the emperor couldn't resist the princess's coquettishness and left behind the imperial decree for the marriage. Song Shu knelt down with the princess to express gratitude, his face still showing no sign of emotion. I suddenly remembered how he looked when he came to propose outside my house. Back then, he knelt all night without eating or drinking. When my parents agreed, he was so overjoyed that he jumped up, but then immediately fell flat on his face because he was dizzy from hunger. Seeing him in such a sorry state, my heart was happier than ever before. Song Shu, even when you fall, you look graceful. Such a beautiful person. From now on, belongs to me. However, this possession seems all too brief. The princess received the imperial decree and looked at Song Shu with delight. Song Shu smiled, but I could see that he was not happy, even showing a hint of worry. Song Shu is an extremely confident person. Since marrying him, I have only seen such a worried expression on his face twice. The first time was when he learned he had been conscripted, and the second time was the night he returned from reporting to the palace. Song Shu and the princess's wedding is scheduled in 3 days. Over these 3 days, the princess's residence saw many new faces, all sent by the emperor to help prepare for the wedding. Although the princess's health had improved, she still often felt weary, but as a princess, everything was handled by the servants. She only needed to focus on resting and recuperating. While the princess slept, Song Shu stayed by her side, reading storybooks. But I just can't focus. I still don't know how my parents are doing these past 2 days. I've tried to gather resentment and transform into a vengeful spirit, but for some reason, my resentment dissipates as soon as I try to accumulate it. It simply won't hold together. I suppose I'm just a useless person, unable to protect myself or my parents. Even as a ghost, I couldn't take revenge on the princess. I sighed all day long. While Song Shu lived quite comfortably, he lost interest in the storybook after just 2 pages, so he would occasionally leave the princess's courtyard and wander around the estate. I didn't want to be alone with the princess, so I had no choice but to float above Song Shu's head, following him around like a kite. This outing truly opened my eyes. I may be a country girl, but the scale and grandeur of my wedding to Song Shu rivaled that of any young lady from the capital at the time. I was overjoyed. Not only did I get a handsome man for free, but he was also willing to spend generously. It wasn't until I witnessed the wedding preparations at the princess's estate that I realized what it truly meant to be outshone. At this moment, the princess's mansion is as splendid as a treasure trove, with even the red silk ribbons hanging under the eaves embroidered with gold thread. I couldn't help but stare wide-eyed. With so many treasures, how wonderful it would be if they could be shared with the uncles and aunties in the village who can't even afford a full meal. As I drifted along, I suddenly caught sight of a sneaky figure. The man was dressed in a grey robe, holding a long object in his hand, and was walking along the base of the wall toward the princess's courtyard. The princess's residence was crowded, and Song Shu couldn't see him. Floating in the air, I could see everything clearly. What the man held in his hand was a wooden sword engraved with a divination array. I jolted, remembering the sorcerer the emperor had mentioned. Could it be that this person is the sorcerer who performed the ghost-banishing ritual for the princess? This is bad. This sorcerer clearly possesses formidable magical abilities. If the haunting at the princess's residence was truly caused by Song Shu, he would definitely discover it. Without another thought, I hurriedly followed after him. The princess's courtyard was usually undisturbed, and the sorcerer easily entered her room. He approached the princess's bed, raised the wooden sword, closed his eyes, and began murmuring incantations. Soon, a blue light enveloped the princess. It was the ghost-repelling barrier that Song Shu had cast on the princess that night. The sorcerer opened his eyes and looked at the princess. His expression changing dramatically, he hurried forward and shook the princess awake. The princess, still drowsy, frowned upon seeing the visitor. "Why are you here? Where is Song Shu?" The sorcerer immediately knelt before the princess. "Your Highness, I have been ordered by His Majesty to thoroughly investigate the haunting in the mansion. I must ask Your Highness to cease all contact with Song Shu. The protective barrier he set up for you is actually enough." The princess interrupted impatiently. "Your skills are inferior. The barrier failed, and I was nearly killed by a horde of ghosts. It is only out of leniency that I have not punished you. How dare you slander Song Shu? If it weren't for him, I wouldn't even know how I died." The sorcerer grew anxious. "Princess, I have just carefully investigated the mansion, and Song Shu is..." Before he could finish his sentence, a plume of black smoke suddenly drifted in through the window and, with lightning speed, rushed into the sorcerer's body. The sorcerer froze in place as if someone had struck his pressure point. The next moment, he suddenly lunged toward the princess like a man possessed. Brandishing his wooden sword, the princess screamed and scrambled to the corner of the bed, crawling and stumbling in panic. The sorcerer threw himself onto the bed, letting out strange, guttural cries. "I'm going to kill you! I'm going to kill you!" Just as the wooden sword was about to pierce the princess's chest, Song Shu suddenly rushed in. He formed a hand seal and struck forcefully toward the sorcerer with a palm strike. The sorcerer spat out a mouthful of black blood, collapsed limply off the bed, and ceased breathing. Black smoke emerged from the sorcerer's body and fled out the window. Song Shu did not pursue. He anxiously checked on the princess, whose face was covered in blood from the sorcerer's spray. "Your Highness, are you all right?" The princess trembled violently, her gaze unfocused as she stared at the sorcerer's corpse on the ground. He wanted to kill me. Someone wants to kill me." Song Shu held the princess's hand. "It's all right, Your Highness. He's already dead." The princess threw herself into Song Shu's arms, weeping like a rain-soaked pear blossom. An hour later, the princess finally regained her composure. Song Shu told the princess that although the malevolent ghost could not approach the exorcism barrier, it could possess a human body. Only those with wicked intentions are easily possessed by malevolent spirits. The sorcerer is precisely such a person with wicked intentions. The princess, having been saved twice by Song Shu, completely trusted him and even issued an order that from then on, only Song Shu could enter her room at dusk. The emperor's decree arrived. It was said that the incident with the sorcerer had frightened the princess, so the wedding date would be postponed once again. The princess felt mentally exhausted and did not refuse. After dinner, Song Shu went to the courtyard to brew medicine for the princess, and I followed him. In the past, when he brewed medicine, I would float to the rooftop to watch the clouds. I don't want to see him running around for the sake of his enemy, but the matter of the sorcerer is truly strange. I suspect that this was done by Song Shu, yet if he wanted to kill the princess, why did he rush in at the critical moment to save her? Unable to figure it out, I decided to stay by his side and see if he acted unusually at this moment. Song Shu was carefully adding the herbs sent by the Imperial Hospital into the medicine pot. After adding all the herbs, he suddenly shook his sleeve, and a black pill fell into the pot with a clatter. Strange, this wasn't something from the Imperial Hospital. Just as I was about to float over for a closer look, a guard rushed in frantically, saying he had urgent news to report. Song Shu didn't even look up, speaking unhurriedly. His Highness has ordered that no one but me is allowed to enter the room. If you have something to say, just tell me, the guard stammered. His Highness ordered me to execute Yunyang's parents. What about you? Song Shu raised his eyes, giving him a cold stare. The guard suddenly fell to his knees with a thud, his forehead hitting the ground heavily. When I arrived at Yunyang's home, it was just an empty house. I searched for several days but couldn't find any trace of her parents. I know failing to complete His Highness's order is a capital offense, but I beg you, Prince Consort, to plead for mercy on my behalf. Please ask His Highness to spare my life. Upon hearing his words, I was overjoyed. My parents were not dead, but why would they suddenly move away? Song Shu didn't seem the least bit surprised. He remained silent for a long moment before saying, Her Highness is unwell. There is no need for her to know about this. You may leave. The guard kowtowed repeatedly, saying, Thank you, Lord Consort, for sparing my life. Thank you, Lord Consort. Song Shu paid him no further mind. Lowering his head to continue preparing the princess's medicine, I sat down across from him, gazing at his focused face. Is it you? I said. You're the one who made my parents move, aren't you? Song Shu remained silent. He was carefully fanning the small medicine stove, but I already knew the answer. That day at the Song residence gate, what he quietly instructed the servants about must have been this matter. Thank you. I am genuinely grateful to him. Even though he is currently serving the princess diligently, Song Shu continued with his actions, but the corners of his mouth lifted slightly. The next day, a royal physician arrived at the residence. It was sent by the emperor. When the sorcerer encountered trouble, the emperor also grew suspicious. Fortunately, the princess's body showed no abnormalities, and even some chronic illnesses she had carried since birth had improved significantly. Under Song Shu's careful care, the princess became healthier and stronger. Upon learning of this, the emperor finally let down his guard and set a new auspicious date for the two. While waiting for the wedding day, the princess occasionally took Song Shu out. I followed behind them, watching them stroll the streets and watch plays like an ordinary couple. The princess had a mercurial temperament, often wanting to kill, but Song Shu always stopped her. Slowly, the princess's murderous intent diminished greatly, as if she had truly changed her nature. If someone bumped into her on the road, she no longer got angry and even gave them silver. I followed behind them, watching this harmonious and perfect scene, and suddenly felt a sense of relief. Perhaps Song Shu could really change the princess. Wouldn't that be a good thing? From now on, no innocent people will ever die by the princess's blade again. If this is what Song Shu wants to do, the future he desires, I am willing to sincerely wish him well. I never expected that what Song Shu wanted was never to change the princess. On the 15th of this month, Song Shu stood guard outside the princess's room as usual. I sat in the courtyard, chatting with the ghosts. Some of them, upon learning that the princess had stopped killing, were overjoyed, let go of their hatred, and went to reincarnate. Others still wanted revenge, so they stayed in the princess's mansion, waiting for an opportunity. They asked me what my plans were. I sighed and said, I want to reincarnate, but I can't leave. They all chimed in to help me analyze the situation. Some said I still had unfulfilled wishes. While others claimed I was deeply in love with Song Shu and couldn't bear to leave him, I shrugged, refusing to admit anything. Just as we were chatting happily, the most senior female ghost suddenly widened her eyes, staring in the direction of the princess's room. "What's wrong?" I asked her. "I can feel it," she said. "The princess's barrier seems to be weakening." Upon hearing her words, the demons rushed toward the princess's room like madmen. I quickly followed them. The demons left behind were all seeking revenge. If the princess's barrier truly broke, something terrible would happen. I wonder how Song Shu is doing. He's been helping the princess all along, and these ghosts might not let him off easily. Upon entering the room, I saw the princess leaning in Song Shu's arms, looking aggrieved as she said she had a nightmare. "Her barrier is still intact," the female ghost said. I walked through the crowd of ghosts to the bed to check, and indeed, a faint blue light still shimmered around the princess. "It's just that the blue light seems fainter than before." I reached out to touch that light, and Song Shu suddenly looked up at me. These days, his gaze occasionally falls on me like this. I just thought it was a coincidence and didn't pay much attention. "Yuna," he suddenly spoke, calling my name. I was taken aback, my hand frozen in midair. "Song Shu, what did you say?" The princess looked at him in surprise. Song Shu turned his head, smiling as he looked at the princess. "Your Highness, it's time." Song Shu raised his hand and gently tapped the princess's forehead. The blue light surrounding the princess vanished abruptly, and in the next moment, her eyes widened in shock. "Ah!" A piercing scream tore through the night sky. "Her barrier is gone." The female ghost laughed maniacally, lunging toward the princess. The princess was surrounded by ghosts, and in an instant, she was nowhere to be seen. Only I remained, standing there in a daze, watching Song Shu pass through the ghosts, walking toward me. Her clear eyes reflected the light of the full moon. "Yuna, didn't you say you wanted to be a princess in your next life too?" On the night of the full moon, 100 ghosts come to claim lives. The moment the princess's soul left her body, a powerful force pulled me toward her. When I opened my eyes again, it was already 3 days later. The surroundings were very quiet, with no ghosts and no princess, only Song Shu. He sat by the bed, smiling at me just like before. His smile was more beautiful and gentle than anyone else's in the world. I reached out my hand, carefully extending it toward his face. A warm sensation came from my fingertips. Suddenly, tears began to flow from my eyes. I had long suspected that the series of incidents at the princess's estate were all connected to Song Shu, but I never imagined that one day, I would be able to come back to life. Song Shu told me that his nightly nightmares on the frontier were fabricated, but his acquaintance with the Western region mystic was genuine. It was all because he had saved the mystic's life from the enemy, and in return, the mystic imparted all his knowledge to him. On the day he returned to the city, Song Shu publicly slighted the princess in court, anticipating her retaliation. Yet, he could never have imagined that the princess would cruelly take my life. When burying me, he placed a soul-binding talisman on the jade he had never parted with and buried it alongside me. In this way, he could keep my soul by his side. "Did you plan to swap my soul with the princess's back then?" I asked him. Song Shu nodded. "However, the soul-swapping ritual has strict conditions. The princess must drink the soul-severing decoction for 15 consecutive days and keep your hair with her. Only when her spiritual energy is at its weakest will her soul have a chance to leave her body, allowing you to take her place." With his explanation, I understood. The ingredients for the soul-severing decoction were all contained in the black pills Song Shu had been adding to the princess's medicine. He personally brewed the medicine for her every day to ensure she drank it without missing a single dose. In addition to the soul-severing decoction, Song Shu also added other ingredients to the medicine to strengthen the princess's body. According to him, "This body is ultimately for my use, so let the princess bear the hardships naturally." The possessed sorcerer was also his doing. On the night of the full moon, when the ghost's power was at its peak, Song Shu broke through the princess's barrier. A room full of ghosts frightened the princess, completely shattering her spirit. "What about the hair? How did you get her to take my hair?" I asked. Song Shu pointed at my waist. "It was that red brocade pouch." "Oh right." On the first night at the princess's residence, Song Shu had given the princess this pouch. The princess would never have imagined that inside the exorcism pouch was my hair. And the princess, how is she? I asked again. Truth be told, I wasn't worried about the princess, but rather about those ghosts. They were all innocent people in life. If they were to turn into vengeful spirits because of seeking revenge and could no longer be reincarnated, it would truly be a waste. At the mention of the princess, Song Shu's expression instantly turned dark and sinister. After the life exchange, the princess's soul will endure all the pain you suffered, beheading, burning in flames. She won't escape any of it. As for those vengeful spirits, once they saw the princess being punished, they gave up their pursuit of vengeance and went to be reincarnated. What about the princess? Did she also go to be reincarnated? Song Shu smiled. Do you want to see her? A pale blue light swirled and shifted around me. And the next moment, I saw a translucent figure floating in the air. It's the princess. No, I should say, it's her spirit. She was completely charred black, with a terrifying bloodstain on her neck, barely recognizable as human. Seeing me staring at her, she lunged at me with claws bared. With a gentle wave of Song Shu's hand, the princess let out a sharp cry of pain and was flung 3 feet away. She scrambled to her feet, glaring at me fiercely. Yun Yang, don't think that just because you've taken over my body, everything is settled. I'm not a vengeful ghost now. If Song Shu kills me, he'll suffer the backlash himself. I've already sent a dream to my father, and he'll come to see me soon. When that happens, both you and Song Shu will die. Ignoring the princess, I placed my hands on my hips and asked Song Shu, why couldn't I send dreams when I was a ghost? Song Shu shrugged. You were bound by my soul-locking talisman, so you couldn't do anything. Even the ghost-repelling barrier couldn't detect you. All right, you. Speaking with such righteous indignation, I rushed forward to pinch Song Shu's face, and he let me do it. While the princess floated around in a rage, suddenly, a guard hurried over to report that the emperor had arrived. The princess was overjoyed. My father is here, you're all finished. I straightened my expression and took hold of Song Shu's wrist. Father has arrived, so let us go together to welcome him. When the emperor saw me, the worry on his face eased somewhat. Father, why have you come? I trotted over to link arms with the emperor, speaking softly and coquettishly. Last night, I dreamed that you said Song Shu wanted to kill you and asked me to save you. I smiled. Father, I know you are worried about me, which is why you had such a dream, but look, I am standing here safe and sound. I hopped and spun a circle around the emperor. The emperor's expression softened considerably. Perhaps I was overthinking it. I could see he still had doubts in his heart, so I leaned my head on his shoulder. Father, your daughter is about to get married soon. You must be reluctant to let me go, which is why you had such a dream. I remember when I was little, you wouldn't let me eat candied hawthorn. Today, could you please treat me to some candied hawthorn, just once? The emperor, hearing me mention my childhood, completely let down his guard. He tapped my forehead and said, ever since you were little, you've been mischievous and loved eating those things that poor people eat, but since you like it, I'll have the imperial kitchen make some and send it to the princess's residence. All right, you're the best, father. I nuzzled against my father's arm, and he chuckled with delight. I stuck my tongue out at the princess triumphantly. I was also doted on and cherished by my parents since childhood. Who doesn't know how to act spoiled? The princess, seeing the emperor fooled by me, grew furious and screamed as she materialized in midair. Upon seeing her, the emperor was greatly alarmed and repeatedly shouted, Song Shu, there's a ghost. Quickly rid me of this ghost. The princess was charred black all over, making her completely unrecognizable to the emperor. Seeing that the emperor intended to eliminate her, the princess grew even angrier and charged at me like a madwoman. I was about to dodge when a wide robe suddenly blocked my path. It was the emperor. He shielded me just in time, taking the princess's deadly claw strike directly. After a piercing scream, the emperor fell to the ground, his face turning dark blue, and he breathed his last. The princess froze for a moment, then charged toward me in a furious rage. Just as she was about to reach me, Song Shu rushed over in a few quick strides and struck the princess, who had already turned into a vengeful ghost, dispersing her with a single palm. The princess's face twisted in agony, quickly dissipating into the air without even a chance to utter a word. After the emperor passed away, the crown prince ascended to the throne. The new emperor is a wise ruler who has always despised the domineering princess. In the imperial court, voices calling for the princess's removal also rose and fell, but by the time the new emperor's imperial guards arrived at the princess's residence, it was already empty, with no one in sight. On the night the emperor passed away, Song Shu and I quietly left the capital, taking with us the gold, silver, and treasures from the princess's residence. We headed south all the way, arriving at a place where it felt like spring all year round. We bought a large mansion in the city to serve as our new home. On the day of the handover, Song Shu suddenly said he had something to attend to and asked me to go ahead on my own. Grumbling, I took a carriage and arrived at the front gate. The moment I stepped off the carriage, I froze in front of the heavy wooden door. My parents stood side by side, dressed in beautiful clothes, smiling at me. Yuna, you're back. I rushed into their arms, crying. Song Shu walked out from inside the door, smiling as he looked at me. I remembered what he had said. He said he would build a new house and bring my parents into the city. He said he would give me a better life. He said he wanted to grow old with me. After hearing the story above, what are your thoughts? Feel free to share your opinions in the comments section. Looking forward to hearing from you. If you liked this story, don't forget to like it, share it, and subscribe to my channel. See you next time.